We're going to look at the second part of our breathing and respiration section, and it is called exercise and breathing. So some of the keywords that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be mentioning water, oxygen, carbon dioxide and energy. It would be good if after this short presentation you would be able to identify the factors that contribute to a healthy breathing system. It'd be even better if you could compare your breathing rate before and after exercise. That's kind of the main gist of what we're trying to look at here. And then it would be even better still if you could explain the effect of exercise on the breathing rate. And that's coming in your little extension activity that you'll have to do as part of your homework. So just to get you started, have a quick look at this diagram and see if you can answer the questions. So first of all, we want you to label the diagram and show where gas exchange happens. Then describe what happens during gas exchange, and then explain why is the blood that's coming into the lungs from the heart described sometimes as deoxygenated. So if you could answer those questions in your copy, you can press pause on the presentation while you do that, and then we will keep going in a minute. Now, we're going to look next at your breathing rate. So what is breathing, first of all? It is the mechanical action of getting the air in and out of your lungs. But how many breaths do we take in each minute? Well, this varies according to your age. So if you're talking about a very young baby from birth to 6 weeks, you could be looking at somewhere in the region of 30 to 60 breaths per minute. And a breath is an out and in. So if you were to place your hand on your chest when you're breathing, you'll feel the chest cavity, or the thorax as it's called, going out and back in as you breathe in and out. And once it's done both of those movements, and out and back in, that's counted as one breath. At 3 years old, you could have a breathing rate of somewhere between 20 and 30 breaths per minute. 10 years old, it has started to decline a bit more, so 17 to 23. Then by the time you get to adulthood, it should be down around 12 to 18. And in the elderly, meaning like over 80 years of age, there's kind of a wide swing between 10 and 30 breaths per minute, depending on how well the lungs are functioning at that age. Now let's look at the mechanics of breathing then. So it's divided up into two processes. You have the process of inhalation, which is breathing in, and the process of exhalation, which is breathing out. During inhalation then, and I explained this briefly in part 1, during inhalation you have your intercostal muscles. The intercostal muscles are located here in between the ribs, and they contract, and that forces the ribs to go up and out. So the ribs go up and out. The diaphragm here contracts, and when it contracts, it moves downwards. So if the intercostal muscles have moved up and out, and the diaphragm has moved down, the overall effect of that is to increase the amount of space here in the rib cage or thoracic cavity. That means the space inside in your thorax or your chest. If you have more space in there, or what's called an increased volume, which means more space available in there, you'll remember that from your measurement chapter, that has the effect of decreasing the pressure in there. And if the pressure is decreased, that causes air to rush in from outside, where the air pressure is slightly higher, into the lungs to fill them up. And that's why your air is pulled into the lungs. Breathing out then is the reverse of the process. You'll see here the diaphragm is relaxing now, so it's moving up into a kind of a dome shape. That's the shape of the diaphragm when it relaxes. You'll notice when it was contracted, it was flat or even slightly downwards. And the intercostal muscles also relax. Those are the muscles in between the ribs. And when they relax, the rib cage goes down and in. Overall, you'll notice the amount of space now in here in the chest cavity is much smaller than it was before, which leads to an increase in pressure, and that pressure is what drives the air out of the lungs. So this brings us to a task. Can you match up the boxes here on the left with the boxes here on the right to complete a few sentences that describe what happens during breathing. We'll pause there again just to let you take that down in your copy if you press pause on the video and complete that exercise as part of your homework. Now, the final thing I want you to do for today is a little investigation that you can carry out at home. It'd be useful if you had a helper for this investigation, but not entirely necessary. You can do it yourself as well. And the investigation involves looking at the effect of exercise on breathing rate. Now, I would hazard a guess that you could come up with a hypothesis for this, what you think might happen if you do some exercise. What effect might that have on your breathing rate? Here we're going to introduce some words to you. The first one is a variable. A variable is something that you change in an experiment. So in this experiment, to investigate how exercise affects your breathing rate, you are going to change something. And the thing you're going to change is the level of exercise you're doing. So you might try to find your breathing rate when you are doing no exercise, so when you're sitting down. And then you might decide to find your breathing rate when you are doing a little exercise, such as maybe just walking quickly. And then you might even try more vigorous exercise to see if that has a different effect on your breathing rate, like sprinting around the place for a whole minute. So that's the thing that you are changing. So if you change the level of exercise, that is called the independent variable. So the thing that you change, the thing that you plan on changing and investigating, is the independent variable. And in this case, that's the level of exercise. Then we have a thing called the dependent variable. Now, the dependent variable is basically the results that you're going to be collecting. So if I change one thing, the level of exercise, I expect that something else will change as a result of that, my breathing rate. So in this case, the breathing rate is the dependent variable because we think that our breathing rate will depend on how much exercise we're doing. So if we change the amount of exercise, that's the independent variable, then the breathing rate, that's the dependent variable, will change. Another little concept that we have when we do experiments like these trials, is a control. So sometimes when we're doing an experiment, we want something to compare our experiment against. And in this case, we're going to compare the different levels of exercise against what happens when we're stationary, when we're just sitting down and at rest. So our control is our breathing rate when we're at rest. You'll also notice that we are increasing the accuracy of our results by doing 3 trials each time. So I will ask you at rest and then after exercise, and as I said, you can even introduce an extra little row here to say after vigorous exercise or sprinting. What results do you get for your breathing rate? So to measure your breathing rate, you just put your hands on your chest and count the number of times that your chest goes up and down in 1 minute. So each up and down is just counted as 1. So up and down is 1 breath. Up and down again is 2 breaths. And you count how many of those breaths you take in 1 minute. And repeat that 1, 2, 3 times, and then add them up and divide by 3 to get an average. Then do your gentle walk and do the same process again. So count your breaths for 1 minute, then for another minute, then for another minute, add them all up and divide by 3 to get your average. And then if you wouldn't mind adding just an extra little row in here for after some kind of vigorous exercise, so maybe running around quickly for a minute, and count your breaths again for 1, 2, 3 minutes, add up the answers and divide by 3 to get the average. Now when you've all that done, I would like you to draw a bar chart. So it will have 3 bars in it. One bar will be your breathing rate at rest, another one will be your breathing rate when you were walking, and another one could be your breathing rate when you were doing vigorous exercise, such as sprinting. And I'd like you to analyse that bar chart and write just a sentence or two to explain what we're seeing. So, what effect can you say exercise has on your breathing rate? And support your answer by referring to your results. So, say when it was at rest, it was this. When I was running, it was that. That shows me that exercise has X effect on breathing. And then, if you can, try to explain why you think this might occur. And we'll be revisiting that at the start of our next PowerPoint. Thanks everyone, and good luck with that work.